Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fourmation Podcast. We're on to episode number 35 now, and we're well into the Euros at this point. All 6 Euro 2020 groups have been completed, and the good sign to anyone watching on YouTube is that my England flag is still up, which means England haven't had a disaster. We're still in the tournament. I mean, it really would have been a disaster if we'd been out at this stage, but we now know which 8 teams have missed out on a spot in the knockout rounds. So we're going to be looking ahead to the last 16 games on this week's show. Before we get to that point, Harry, you're back. Did you enjoy your little staycation, should we call it? Isn't that the cool name for an England holiday now? Did you enjoy it?
Do you know what I did? I did really enjoy it. Just 3 days, just a break from the south into Derbyshire. It was quite sunny as well. So for the first 2 days, it was really nice. I think I won my first ever mini golf competition, which is even better. And I got the vaccine on top. So just hit about 3 pigeons with the same stone. So yeah, it was really good. Thanks. Really good.
Yeah, we haven't really seen enough sun in Derbyshire, really, have we, over the last year? Maybe we'll get more joy over the third year. Anyway, less about that. We've had wall-to-wall football over the last 10 days, which has been really good. But Devon, do you think this is where the tournament really starts with the knockouts? It's when everything is there on the line, isn't it? There's no second chances anymore.
Yeah. To put it simply, yeah, you've just explained what the knockout stages are. But I think it can go 2 ways. You can either get a bit too much. Teams can be either overcautious or too expressive, and obviously when it's too expressive and 2 teams are going at it, hopefully the Belgium versus Portugal game will be one that's like that. But it could go either way. But I'm looking forward to it. More games. Unfortunately, now what's up with this 2-day break? We want it on. I want more 2 p.m. kickoffs. I want 3 games a day, but now we've just got 1. Oh.
Well, you've teed me up perfectly there, Dev. I was going to ask Sam. Sam, what are you going to do tonight and tomorrow night when there's no games to watch? I can't remember what it was like before the tournament.
I don't know. You tell me. Or just sit in an empty room and do nothing and wait for the time to pass. I mean, like Devon said, it's just constant football. When tournament's on, you can't really beat tournament football. Just the intensity of it all, the passion from the fans, it's just brilliant. So looking forward to the knockout stages.
Absolutely right. And hopefully, while people are waiting for the weekend's games, that they're listening to this. And if that's what you are doing, then thank you very much. Before we get on to the last 16, and Devon's teased one of the most appetising games that there is to choose from there, Belgium, Portugal. Let's quickly go through the teams that we have lost from the 6 groups. It's only 8 teams. That is what happens with a tournament when it's only 24 teams, and UEFA want to make a last 16 out of it. Is you only lose 8. From Group A, it was Turkey who have been eliminated. The only team that were, Switzerland, finished 3rd and made it through. The Turks were, of course, heavily tipped before the tournament to be a surprise package. I think Sam's tried to hide from this one, but he knows he can't hide from it. But you're certainly not alone in tipping them. As I said, Sam, they scored 1 goal and they conceded 8 across their 3 games. Do you think that maybe the pressure got to them a little bit? Do you think they knew that they were being tipped as this team who had a great chance of going far? Do you think that maybe affected them?
Maybe. I mean, I'm not really sure what happened. It just felt like they were very one-dimensional in the games that they played. I mean, I expected them to lose to Italy in the first game, but it was very comprehensive, and they just, especially in the second half of that game, they really tired out and didn't offer anything. So it's, I guess in their results running up to the competition, it was a bit like all over the place. Like they hammered the Dutch and they drew, I think, 3-3 with Latvia. So there was still a bit of uncertainty around them, and I think they missed Cenk Tosun, their highest goal scorer in qualifying, but I don't think he would have made much of a difference because defensively they were all over the place in all the games, really.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because in our previous episode, when they just lost to Italy, we were kind of saying, let's not write them off yet. Let's see what they can do in their last couple of games, but I think that Wales game in particular, they just didn't seem to show up like they should have done. There was a lot of talk before it about in Baku that they'd have a lot of backing, which they did have, but I think in that big stadium so far from the pitch, I don't think it really made much of a difference anyway. Moving on to Group B, 2 teams were eliminated from Group B because 3 of the 4 all finished on 3 points. So Denmark managed to finish in second with 3, which is fascinating, really. It shouldn't really happen in a tournament, but they've managed it. They, of course, hammered Russia in their last game. Finland and Russia have gone home. And I wanted to mention that Denmark against Russia game in particular, Harry, because the atmosphere looked really good in Copenhagen and it was really pleasing to see the celebrations. But something I wanted to touch on specifically is that Andreas Christensen goal in the second half. And I think it's almost up there with Patrick Schick's goal for me. I just think the moment and the connection on the ball. What did you think of it?
It was absolutely unbelievable. I think the XG on it was 0.02, so that really does show how unbelievable it was, especially from a centre back as well. But you know, they really had it all going their way. Having it at Copenhagen, you know, it's the home ground, even if UEFA sometimes say no, it's not actually, because they had like Croatia v Scotland. Croatia was the first team, so we never normally know. But you know, when you've got a chance in the last game of the season or last fixture, and you know, Russia, yeah, they did great in the World Cup, but they're in the away side this time. They're not on the home side. They just rode that momentum, rode the wave of the support, and what a moment! What an absolute fantastic moment for Denmark, because a lot of people, they probably thought they were elsewhere after the first 2 games. And it was just going to be a very disappointing tournament for obvious reasons. You know, things have happened in the past, but you know, the dark horses have stayed alive, and that's good to see.
Yeah, certainly have. Group C then, North Macedonia were the only team to exit from that group. They ended up with 0 points, and Devon, they might be going home without a point, but they haven't disgraced themselves at the tournament, have they? Would you agree with that?
No, definitely not. Unless you mean disgraced by the way some of the tactical approach was by pretty much beating up the opposition at times. But you know, it was fun to watch. I think they really made teams work for them points that they took off them, and and overall, I think they've gave some great moments. I mean, who'd have thought that Goran Pandev would have had that moment, obviously, and signing off with scoring his country's first major goal in a tournament, first goal in a major tournament. But overall, obviously, the quality just wasn't there. But they have got a couple of exciting players. You know, Elmas, is that his name? Is it Napoli? He scored around 21 goals last season. He came up and showed a bit of quality, just couldn't find that finishing edge. But overall, I think they'll be happy with their efforts this summer.
Group D then, which was England and Scotland's group, of course, and it was Scotland who came up short. And I went to Sam to talk about his Turkey prediction, which means I've got to go to Harry to talk about his also. Harry, I think you had Scotland to make the quarters, didn't you, in our episode before the tournament? But instead they've crashed out with only a point. Harry, why do you think it went so wrong for them at Hampden Park? We saw how good their performance was at Wembley, and they stopped England and they got that draw, but it didn't go right for them in Scotland, did it?
No, look, you can win a game if your star player is Gareth Bale or you have someone up front that just carries your sides. But the problem is when your best player and standout player by an absolute mile is your left back, he can get assists, but if they're not players good enough to get on the end of it and put it in the back of the net, it's as simple as that, really. You're not going to do well. And I most certainly overlooked that. Looking at the stats, I know a lot of people don't like XG, but they scored 1 off an XG of 4.84. You know, it's not like they didn't have the chances. I think in every game bar the one against England, they out XG's their opposition, if you like. And even against England, I think they had enough chances to win the game. Yes, I know John Stones really should have scored from that free header that he had, but Chadden's had plenty of chances across the tournament. Lyndon Dykes had plenty of chances across the tournament. John McGinn, who's been fantastic in qualifying, I think he had 10 in 20 under Steve Clarke. He had a few chances, especially in the last game. He had a couple that he really could have done better with. But like I say, Patrick Schick, he's the game changer for the Czech Republic. A great header and an absolutely outstanding goal. Against England, they just couldn't break them down. And against Croatia, look, you got Modric, a Ballon d'Or winner in the midfield. He's got that quality in the midfield that you can, pop a pass back, but also score an absolutely unbelievable goal like that. Whereas Scotland just don't have any of those sort of players. So I don't think they'll obviously be disappointed about going out, but they can. For me, I think they can see the stepping stones to success. It's just about finding a player that can hit the back of the net. Because if they've done that, if they could do that, they would have definitely gone through in my eyes, because I don't think the Czech Republic or Croatia are absolutely stunning against them. I just think they had just a tiny bit extra quality in that final third that got them through the game.
Yeah, I think, as you say, I think Scotland have definitely enjoyed certain elements of the tournament. Their first one in 23 years. When will their next one be? Who knows? But I think Andy Robertson said in his interview that they're going to target the World Cup, and of course they are. That's a stupid thing to say. Every country wants to qualify. I don't know what I'm on about there. Apologies. Group E, then, moving swiftly on. Group E lost 2 teams in the groups. And we didn't see many shock outcomes in the group stage. But Sam, do you think maybe the biggest one is that Poland finished bottom of this group?
I think so, considering they made the quarterfinals of Euro 2016. So, and to have a player like Robert Lewandowski scoring 41 league goals and having just an insane campaign with Bayern Munich last time out, it is a bit of a shock, but he just doesn't have the same sort of service. Obviously, in that Sweden game, he tried to pull them along on his own with 2 brilliant goals, but he just doesn't have the same sort of service that he does at Poland, that he does at Bayern Munich. So they just don't have the players around him to sort of support him, and that's where they've been found out really in this tournament.
Yeah, Poland exiting along with Slovakia, and it was Martin Dubravka who had an absolute stinker against Spain yesterday afternoon.
That's putting it lightly, George.
Oh, Sunday League stuff, that mistake. Yeah. I couldn't believe it, to be honest. Group F then, which is, of course, the group of death. And I think before the tournament, almost everybody wrote off Hungary. They did end up finishing bottom of this group, so they're heading out. But Devon, how impressed have you been with the performances they've put in?
Yeah, I think we mentioned it last podcast against when they lost 3-0 to Portugal, that overall defensively they looked quite good. They nullified Portugal for most of the game, and they kind of took the lessons from that final 15-20 minutes and sort of implemented it into the other 2 games. Obviously, to get draws off of France and Germany is commendable, and they didn't just hold them to 0-0 draws either. They went for it and scored 3 goals. And overall, I was a bit gutted for him, more from an England perspective. So I said in the explainer on TikTok that, I was like, if France get a goal, maybe we might play Hungary instead of Germany. But ultimately, it wasn't to be. But they'll not be discouraged. I mean, there's no expectation on them. It was sort of a free hit because everyone had wrote them off before, just seconds after the draw had been made back in 2019, were it? So, I think they've really made a good account of themselves.
Yeah, and I heard a very interesting stat on Hungary while I was making my notes. I was listening to the Euro Daily 5 Live podcast, and I should say that this was Mark Chapman who provided this. Not that he's going to be listening, but it's just worth saying anyway.
For copyright reasons.
And he said that Hungary were ahead for more minutes and behind for fewer minutes than any other team in Group F, which I thought was quite interesting.
I mean, last night was just crazy because England at some point were playing each team in the group, so that just showed how actually close it was in the end.
Too right, Sam. It was
like a last game of season like this year's championship final day, wasn't it? It was just like goal here, that changes everything, and it was just like all mixed up, and that's the beauty of these like last games is jeopardy, as people like to say. But
yeah, pretty balmy, and I think the fact that it meant so much for who England were going to be playing next meant that everyone in this country was very engaged with what was going on. That's all those groups signed off then. The 8 teams that are heading home, we've covered all of them there. So we will move on very shortly to the last 16 and what we have to come this coming weekend. Before we do that, I just want to do a quick update on the Euro Fantasy League. Since our last episode, Leave My Barcelona, the name of the team, has jumped above me into top spot. I now know who that is as well. His name is Freddie Halil. Freddie, if you're watching or listening, I'm coming for you in this upcoming match week, all right?
I'm definitely not.
The highest scoring player for match week 3 was the leader's brother. That was Alfie Halil with 88 points. Well done with that, mate. And it's also worth mentioning that top of the table after match week 2 was Fred Posner, and he's not too far off the leader either. So it's still pretty finely poised going into the knockout rounds. And it gets interesting now as well, because if you had any players from the teams who've been knocked out, then you want to be getting rid of those before the next deadline. So if you're involved with that, then keep an eye on it. The code for the league, if you want to join, will be in the description. But that's all we'll say on that for now. Maybe there'll be a prize for the winner at the end, but we shall see.
You spend the evening with George.
Is that a prize? I don't think it's a prize, is it? Blimey. No. Any suggestions for that? Then let us know. Any suggestions for the prize? But it won't be
not too costly, hopefully.
Yeah, very good point, Sam. Moving on then. As we said, I've built this up way too much. I keep saying we're coming to it, and now we finally are coming to it. The last 16 draw. We're going to start with the left side of the draw. It's, of course, split into 2 now. So we know that England can only play a certain amount of teams until the final. And England have actually been dealt a pretty good hand with that. The left side, it's fair to say it looks much tougher than the right side. And England are on the right side. So we're going to start with the left side. We're going to go through each match, give our predictions to see how silly we can make ourselves look. And we'd like it, of course, if anyone listening, if you want to give your predictions ahead of it, then please do let us know, and we'll bear those in mind when all these results are done. And maybe there'll be a prize for that, although probably not, let's be honest. Starting off then, Italy versus Austria. Italy, of course, the winners of Group A. And they've been so impressive in the group stage. They won all 3 of their games. They haven't conceded a goal. Starting then, focusing on Italy, Devon, do you expect this game against Austria to be more of a challenge to them than their group games, or do you think they'll still come through it with relative ease?
I do think it'll be more challenging. I think Austria have got a overall better side, arguably, than Switzerland, Wales, and Turkey. The thing what's going through my mind is I think Italy will just be too strong. They've already shown that they can play against the negative of negative sides. They're the passing is relentless. They get into the tight areas and they can move the ball well. And it's not just like they're one dimensional either. They can put it onto the left and get crosses in. They can work their way into the middle. It's overall, I think even the loss of Chiellini won't be too much, because I think, Bastoni and the other guy that came in, his name just escapes me. But I think they're both competent as long as they've got Bonucci next to them. I think they've got strength overall. Verratti just adds a bit more experience in there. But, you probably won't want to break up that midfield trio of Jorginho, Locatelli and Barella, just because them 3 have just been so fluid. They've been important to the attacks in the triangles. And overall, I think Italy should come away with this one. It'll be a good tester to see how they react with players such as Sabitzer and Alaba, who will actually try to get on the ball more. They'll actually try and make things work rather than, as we saw in the Turkey game, and firing it up, as we saw in the Wales game, just trying to get up as quickly as possible. They'll actually try to control it a bit more. So it'll be interesting to see how Jorginho deals with that in midfield, and if the wing backs sort of tuck in more.
Yeah, and Harry, how encouraging do you think it will have been for the Italian fans that they made so many changes for that game against Wales, and their
To look
B team.
comfortable.
Yeah, it was so
That's the
comfortable
thing.
for them, wasn't it?
It looks so comfortable. Their defense looked fine against Gareth Bale. And if you look at Austria, they did exactly really what was expected. They beat North Macedonia, they beat Ukraine, but they got quite comfortably beaten by the Netherlands. So I think Italy, they should be really happy. They should be really, really happy, especially now because they've had those players get those rests. Insigne and Immobile, I was not impressed because my fantasy team did take a slight hit with none of them playing, and then me forgetting and then not changing my captain and then having to put it on John Stones instead of Wijnaldum or Depay. But I've let it go now. But I think they should have serious confidence, because I think they were quite under the radar by a lot of people, Italy, and I do think they're now strongly favourites, or one of the like 3 or 4 favourites for the tournament if they can get through this dark horse / underdog affair.
Sam, do you think we've seen enough from Austria in the group stage to suggest they can cause a problem, or do you not see it?
Well, like Devon said, they won the 2 games they were probably expected to win in North Macedonia and Ukraine, but when they came up against a side like Netherlands, who have immense attacking quality, as do Italy, they struggled a little bit, and they really do rely on. I think they're hoping to have Baumgartner back, who's a big midfielder for them, but they do heavily rely on David Alaba and Sabitzer to do most of the dirty work and the work going forward as well. Alaba from a sweeper position in the defence. So, Italy are usually known for their defensive rigidity. I can't say that word. Grit and grind. Rigidity, that's it. Like grinding out results. But in this tournament, they've just been immense on the other side of the field, pressing from minute 1 and not giving up, being relentless. So I think Austria will really struggle. I'd be surprised to see them come out of this one.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with you. These 2 countries, worth saying, haven't played each other since August 2008. That one was a 2-2 draw in a friendly. And Austria's last win over Italy was in December 1960. So all the it seems everything is against them going into this game, but we shall see. Predictions then. I've gone with a 2-0 Italy win. Devon?
I'm going to say that 3-0. I think they'll continue their clean sheet and dominance.
Go on, Harry.
Yeah, the same as you. 2-0. They're going to have their key players back, and it's just going to be quite comfortable in my eyes.
3-1 for me.
3-1 for you. Yeah, it's very, very one-sided there, but we shall see. Maybe Austria causes a surprise, but it doesn't look likely, let's be honest. If Italy are able to beat Austria, as we all expect that they will, then they will face the winner of a game that Devon has already teased, and it's probably the most appetising last 16 game on paper, that is. Football isn't played on paper, of course, but it definitely is. It's between Belgium and Portugal. Belgium breezed through their group with 3 wins. But would you say they've kind of been similar to Italy, Harry, in that they haven't really been tested too much so far? How difficult do you think this game will be for them compared to their 3 group games?
I think it's going to be a much more even affair, obviously, than Italy versus Austria. Or Austria could throw a surprise up in there, but for Belgium, I'd be very excited coming up against a Portugal side. Yes, they have been in the group of death, but they've definitely shown that they can be beaten. Don't get me wrong, they convincingly beat Hungary. Well, not convincingly, it took them to the 84th minute to then just start popping in goals left, right and centre. And then they're the only team to beat Hungary in that group, which is quite funny at the end of it. But they've got a bit of an ageing defence. They've shown their vulnerabilities at the back. And I think a player like Romelu Lukaku can, expose that sort of thing. So yes, of course, it's going to be a more difficult game than any of the ones previously, but I think they're just a bit. To be fair, Belgium have got an aging defence a bit as well, so I guess you could see it both sides. But for me, Belgium go into the game favourites, and I'm going to say it: they're going to knock out the Euro holders. But always watch out for Ronaldo, because anything can happen when that guy's on the pitch.
Yeah, and I think when I was looking ahead to this game, I'd sort of eyed up a potential matchup between Lukaku, who looks like he's on fire at the moment, and then Pepe, who's 38 years old. And I think there's been signs, mostly in Portugal's game against Germany, that Pepe's maybe lacking a bit of sharpness. Maybe that's harsh, but I would say so. So personally, I can see that creating a bit of trouble for Portugal. Sam, would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, Lukaku is just on red hot form. He was my pick for the Golden Boot before the tournament, and his recent record for Belgium is just insane. 23 goals in his last 21 games. He's just unstoppable at the moment. Like you say, Pepe, I think he's 38 now. He's getting on a little bit. Obviously, he's got Ruben Diaz as a formidable partner, but with Kevin De Bruyne returning for Belgium and just looking like he was never gone with 2 assists and a goal already in like 1.5 games, it's going to be difficult for Portugal to keep Belgium out. And I think that will be the difference in the end. Although they've got Ronaldo at the other end, who's just, again, been brilliant. 5 goals already in this tournament, chasing, breaking records left and right. So it will definitely be an interesting game. And there's one other thing that I wanted to pick up in this game is whether Renato Sanchez might start again. Obviously, Bruno Fernandes's form would have been a worry for Portugal, but Sanchez looked brilliant in that France game. His ball carrying especially, he's just couldn't be dispossessed, and it'll be interesting to see whether Fernandes comes back into the team or they stick with Sanchez.
Dev, what are your thoughts on that? Were you impressed with Sanchez last night, as Sam was?
Yeah, I think he run the show in terms of carries from a defensive standpoint going forward, and I think he will start. Personally, I think Portugal will go more defensive, like they were in 2016. Now they're in a knockout situation. I think there's less risk with that. And having Sanchez in there, he'll be able to break things up, get the ball and carry it forward for that forward line of, Jota and Ronaldo seem to not linked up well, but individually look brilliant when they're on the ball and going forward. I mean, they're more talented than that 16 squad. So there's no doubt that they could probably exploit that high line that Belgium play with. But it seems like Belgium are just going to, even if you get inside Belgium, they'll outscore you anyway. We saw the impact. You said that they got relatively untested, but that Denmark game, for the first half, especially until De Bruyne came on, which was like a cheat code, they did struggle a lot. And it's just the support. So Lukaku's good and will get you out of situations like that, but De Bruyne is the one that's supplying him.
I think Belgium can look at this and go, even if we do go behind early, Portugal have thrown away 2 1-goal leads to start with anyway. They did it against France. They did it against Germany. So at any point in the game, I think you could sort of take it from both sides. You could say, maybe Portugal are a bit nervous, but you can say, Belgium, they're a bit not untested, but unproven in actual European competition. They've not got to the final or anything. But if they do go 1-0 down, look, you've got a player like Lukaku's up front that scored 3 from 4 shots. He's got that potent ability. And I think that could really serve Belgium well.
Also worth saying as well that in that 4-2 defeat to Germany, Portugal were given a real headache by Germany's wing-back system. And if Belgium stick with the formation they've been going with so far, then surely they could inflict similar problems. Let's get some predictions for this one then. Sam, what do you reckon?
I think it'll be close, but I'm going 2-1 Belgium in the end.
Ditto, I've got 2-1. Devon?
I've had 2 in my mind. I wanted to go with you lot, but let's go adventurous. Let's go 4-3 to Belgium.
Live. I mean, I'm there for that game. I'm ready. I've got the pop.
Certainly be watching.
0-0 incoming.
Go on, Harry.
Yeah, I was thinking the same as you and Sam and George. Portugal to score first, but Belgium to win it 2-1.
4-3, Devon.
3 Ronaldo penalties.
I mean, my predictions of getting, Portugal going to the quarterfinals and Turkey doing really well have not paid off. So let's just throw it all out the window.
You never know.
Go for it.
Yeah.
It's incredible. You mentioned Ronaldo there, Sam, which you just sent me off on this tangent. But watching that game last night, when he was stepping up for both of them, it did make me think, does he ever look like he's not scoring a penalty?
No.
I can't remember the last time he missed.
Not an inch of doubt in that guy's mind.
He missed against Iran in 2018 World Cup.
Oh,
I think he
there's
scored
not-
12 of his last set. I think the commentator said 12 of his last 17 he scored, which is what? One of his last 6 that he's missed. Or no, my maths is completely
But
wrong.
for
Don't
some
look at
reason
me
as
for
well,
mathematics.
I can remember him missing from Man United in 2008 in the Champions League for just some reason. I think it was semi-final. I think he put it straight off at bar or something. But flashback.
There we go. Then maybe he is human. Moving on then to another game on the left side of that draw, which looks very intriguing. Croatia against Spain, 2 teams who didn't dominate their groups by any stretch, hence why they're facing each other, because it's 2 runners up. But they both finished with a bit of a flourish to confirm their places in the knockouts. Harry, you watched Croatia in their game against Scotland. What impressed you about them in that game?
I mean, you've got to say a lot of things. A lot of things did impress me. It's just, for me, I think their midfield is obviously their strongest part. I think they still do miss that clinical striker. You know, Modric got the goal. Not Rebic. I keep calling him Rebic. It's not Rebic. It's Perisic and Vlasic. But I do feel like they still miss that attacker up front. You know, I think Scotland were good for parts, but I think just getting that early goal really set the tone of the game. Yes, Scotland got the equaliser, but I just think they just had that extra bit of quality. But I don't think they'll have that against Spain. I think Spain will do what they did against Scotland to Croatia. I think they've just got an extra tiny bit of quality on what Croatia did. And look, in none of the 3 games, maybe against the Czech Republic, they looked okay. But I don't think they were necessarily that impressive. You know, England dominated them. Scotland gave them a good run for their money until Modric's fantastic goal. And the Czech Republic, they did okay. I know they were very unlucky to concede that penalty. For me, that's not a penalty. Or it's a very, 51-49. But yeah, they're impressive, but not overwhelming against the 3rd lowest ranked team in the competition in Scotland. So I think for me, it's got to be Spain.
They were carried a little bit by, Modric's brilliance, really becoming Croatia's oldest and youngest goal scorer at the Euros against Scotland. So I think coming off one of his best seasons for Real Madrid as well, he's shown that age is just a number, and I think it'll be difficult for him though against a Spain side that really control the possession, where they've had 85% in the first game and 76.4 in the second. They really dominate the ball, so it'll be difficult for him to get onto the ball and dictate the play.
Yeah, and you mentioned there how much Spain have dominated their games, but I think they struggled to assert that dominance in their first 2 games, but obviously that they managed it in their third very much so. Devon with a 5-0 win over Slovakia. Do you think they won by such a margin because they were really good, or because Slovakia were just really poor?
I think that the 5-0 win could go 2 ways. And I think because of what happened for the first goal and the second one, I think it was just total self-destruction from the Slovakian defence. I think the scoreline definitely flattered Spain's group stage, because I think although they have kept the ball well, especially against Sweden and even Poland, they had possession just in the wrong areas. They just couldn't get into those tight areas that Italy have been able to work in. But on the flip side, winning 5-0 certainly does a lot for your confidence. And if that team needs anything, it is that confidence at the minute. But I think if Croatia stay tight, they don't let Spain work in those areas, I think this could go down to potentially extra time and penalties.
It should be a good game, though, because both teams do come into the game with momentum. Obviously, they both got their first win of the tournament in a 5-0 win against Slovakia, and Croatia, at points they were going out because one of the teams had to win, and it's a good 3-1 win. So it's going to be good because both of them will be in a good mindset. They've not just come off of a boring draw or a loss, but they've already qualified like Wales did, for example. They're both coming in with a win. They both had their heads up, and yeah, should be a good game.
Yeah, I think you make a great point about the momentum, Harry. Predictions then. Devon, are you going to tell me there's going to be loads of goals in this one as well? Please, go on.
No, well, I reckon it'll finish 5-3 on penalties after a 0-0 game.
0-0 on this one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, Spain have missed their last 5 penalties, so I wouldn't bat
Yeah,
them
but
in a
they might
penalty
score
shootout.
3-0 Croatia penalty win.
That is an impressive record, by the way. Missing your last 5 penalties.
What a contrast. We were just talking about how good Ronaldo is, and then see Spain. I think I saw a Man United fan reeling about that stat yesterday, I think it was, Sam, because obviously they lost to Villarreal in the final, and Villarreal didn't miss a single one. So there we go. Sam, what's your prediction?
I'm going 1-0 Spain.
Harry, you reckon Spain are edging it as well, don't you?
Yeah, but I'm going to go 2-0 instead. Close, but I think it'll be a 2-0 game.
I've got 2-1 Spain win. So we've all gone different on that one. None of us back in Croatia, but who knows? They are World Cup finalists.
I think we've all had the same winners though so far, just different scores.
I didn't say who would win the penalty shootout. To be fair, I think.
You just said that.
I'll throw a little bit. Here you go. Here's a spanner for you. Croatia wins on penalties.
Croatia could do it. They could easily win. But...
Yeah, certainly capable. The winner of that game will play the winner of this game, France against Switzerland. World champions France. They managed to top Group F despite drawing 2 of their 3 games. It's an interesting one with France because they were tipped so much at the start of the tournament, but that they maybe haven't been as impressive as some would have hoped. But Sam, do you think it should maybe be a concern to other teams that France have remained unbeaten despite not really getting into their groove?
I mean, they're in the toughest group, so it's always going to be difficult. But I still think they've been pretty good. I mean, that midfield 3 of Pogba, Kante, Rabiot has been pretty formidable because they have all bases covered in that sense of attacking creativity, and Pogba and Kante is just tracking all over the place, and Rabiot's that defensive solidity is the anchor of the 3. So they've been pretty good. They've just been trying to find that balance going forward. Obviously, Mbappe's still been good, but he hasn't scored. I think he had 6 shots in that first half against Hungary. They didn't score. So I think it'll only be a matter of time for him to once he finds the back of the net, he'll really get going. And it would have been a big boost to see Benzema score twice against Portugal last night. That would be big to break his duck. And Griezmann as well. I think they're looking for a bit more from him as well. So there's still a lot to come from France. And that, like you say, that is the scary thing with them.
Yeah, and Devon, Sam mentioned there how that midfield trio have kind of covered every base for them. And I think they showed in that second half in particular against Portugal just how strong they are as a unit.
Yeah, I think in terms of this game anyway, and probably for everybody in the tournament, I think I think their areas are a lot better than a lot of teams throughout the pitch. I think they've got good balance. I think the reason why we've not seen the best of France yet is because if you think back to the 2018 tournament, I cannot for the life remember their group. However, it was not as hard as this year. So you think, when you play Portugal, you play Germany, that sort of games where you play them in the quarterfinals, the semi-finals, the final, where you've got to tactically be different. Whereas a lot of other teams have had a bit of an easier approach, which allows them to play a little bit around with systems. It allows them to get different players in, whereas France have had to be kind of that reserve side to make sure first and foremost that they get into this knockout stage. And I believe that they will now Switzerland's a favourable game and that it could see them flourish now.
Harry, do you hold out any chance for Switzerland? What do you think they need to do to try and beat this France side?
It's a similar situation to when we were talking about Austria. They've done exactly what people expected. They lost against the top team. They drew against the team one above them, and they beat Turkey. They always seem to get out of the group. So that's something that they always. That's what people sort of expect of Switzerland nowadays. But then on the flip side, no one expects them to get any further than the first knockout stage. That someone's probably got a stat somewhere, but I don't know when the last time they progressed further than the round of 16 was. And yes, they've been okay in fits and spurts. Shaqiri's, it was a key part of their 3-1 victory against Turkey. But yeah, I think France are just too strong. It's an obvious thing to say. France are just too strong, and they came up, unscathed in the groups as left. They didn't lose a game, and I think that could put them in good stead. Like Devon said, the group in the World Cup certainly wouldn't be more difficult. And despite the fact they drew their last game, I think there's still an element of momentum due to the fact that they didn't lose a match.
Yeah, and Switzerland haven't beaten France in 29 years. Their last win was in May 1992, and that was only a friendly as well.
So for a shock.
Yeah, very true. I don't personally think it is going to be a shock. I've got 2-0 France win.
Same here. 2-0.
Anyone else? Devon?
1-0.
Let's go 4-0, and we're going to see the true France.
So we all think they're winning, and we all think they're getting a clean sheet.
Yeah.
I want to be entertained. Entertain me.
I have to say, I hope I'm wrong. I would love to see Switzerland beat them.
Yeah.
But it's hard to see, isn't it? Moving on, then we've covered the left side, which is kind of, I'm going to call it the side of death. They say the group of death. That's
no,
the side of death.
no, this is worse than when you called Sonny.
I'm trademarking that as well. I haven't seen anyone else.
I'm not having that, George. I'm not having that.
No, we're sticking with it. So going over to the side of light, or I don't know. I'm
side of light. Oh my God.
Just say the other side, George.
Oh my.
The right side of the draw. We've got 4 other games, and this is, of course, where we find England. But before we get to England, let's cover some of the other games. The first last 16 game will be between Wales and Denmark. And I think when it comes to the home nations, I think before the tournament began, there was so much fuss about England and Scotland being in the same group and having so much history between the two nations. But Wales kind of went under the radar a little bit. They weren't expected to do much at this tournament because there was so much talk about around Turkey and everything else. But they've come through the group in second place, and they've performed really well. Do you think maybe, Sam, they've even surprised themselves by finishing second?
Yeah, I think the expectations were definitely low going into the tournament. I think they've played well in patches. I think obviously in that Turkey game they were brilliant, and Bale and Ramsey linked up really well. But in the other 2 games, I've not seen enough of them to say that I see them going past Denmark in this game. To be honest, I think they'll struggle in this one, judging by how Denmark performed in that last game against Russia. They were just brilliant. So it'll be an interesting one, yeah. But I think they have defied expectations getting out the group. They defied my expectations, at least.
Mm-hmm. Devon, what are your thoughts on Wales? Do you think they're capable of even getting to the last 4 like they did 5 years ago? They're on the side of light, so...
Don't set me off again. I've completely just lost it there. I think Wales... What they are good at is, absorbing pressure and then using it to kind of catapult themselves forward. I think they are good at, especially with the likes of Kiefer Moore there, he's kind of a wild card. There's not many forwards like him, apart from the big lad at Netherlands, that's what we'll call him. Is it Weghorst?
Weghorst, yeah.
I think Moore could stretch the Denmark defence, especially like the likes of Vestergaard in there and Ajer. I think if he could just mess them around, leave pockets for, like we saw with Bale playing it through to Ramsey on several occasions. I think Ramsey's deep runs are what make Wales pretty much tick, and I think you've got the likes of, they've got that route, and they've also got Connor Roberts, who I've already mentioned, with the top 5 in Europe and the Championship included in that, is the 3rd most creative player with around 56 chances created last year. And I think if you could get him on the ball and some freedom on the right, which I don't think Denmark are necessarily strong on the left, if he whips balls in for Kiefer Moore, then one of the headers are going to go in, and that's probably the only route that Wales could probably get through. I think Denmark are very dominant on the ball. They have been driven by this the Eriksen situation. I think not to put too much disrespect, but once you saw the passion at the end, and it was kind of a sigh of not relief, but a kind of a warning cry to saying we're going to do it for Christian. And I think overall they didn't look that bad. And also a key thing is that they're going to have the Danish fans behind them. I don't think Wales have been admitted, have they? Yet, from what I was reading beforehand. If I'm wrong, correct me. But it's a tough one to call, really, this game.
I think it's two teams that are quite together as a unit. I think the Wales camp is very together as a unit, and especially now, if the Denmark wasn't before, even though it probably most certainly was, it certainly is now. So I think it is going to be. There's just something. For me, there's just something about Wales that I think they can do. I don't know what it is. Probably the Bale factor, and probably the fact that they've done okay in the group. You know, they drew against Switzerland. They did lose against a much changed Italy, but they didn't look awful. They looked okay. They looked fine. They didn't look completely outclassed. And against Turkey, you know, I know Turkey didn't have a great tournament, but it doesn't mean they don't have great players. And this was the Turkey's second game, so they still had plenty of time to get back in the group. You know, beating Switzerland, beating Wales, and they're through basically, and they still just put them away quite comfortably in what was a sort of not a resurgent Turkey, but what could have been quite a resurgent Turkey. So I think Wales could do it again. I think they could have another good little tournament run.
Yeah, I think you make a good point about Wales's togetherness, Harry, because I think it's kind of been overlooked when you consider what Denmark have had happen to them. That's dominated the talk in the lead up to this one, but Wales have certainly got that on their side as well. In terms of predictions then, what do we think? I don't think we think this is going to be quite as straightforward as maybe a few of the other games have been. Sam, what do you think?
I'm going 2-0 Denmark, 20-year-old Mikkel Damsgaard to start. I thought he was brilliant against Russia. Ooh. Really impressed with him.
Yeah, very much so. Devon?
I'm going to go for Wales 1, Denmark 2, I think.
And Harry, are you edging for Wales?
Yeah, I'm going to flip Devon's score on its head, and I'm going to go Wales 2, Denmark 1.
I think it's going to be 1-1. I think it's going to be a bit cagey. And
they both go through.
I reckon Denmark will edge it on pens, but it's a complete lottery. I don't really like predicting who's winning a penalty shootout before we've even watched the 120 minutes before it. But
especially if Bale's decides to go send his one into orbit again.
Yeah, it's still flying, I reckon. Yeah, you're right.
It's just come off the rotation.
Moving on, then there were 3 teams across the tournament to win all 3 of their group games: Italy, Belgium, and the Netherlands in Group C. I'm going to say it, but I'm not even going to ask you. I think it's been way too easy for them so far. I don't think they've been properly tested, but will the Czech Republic provide that test? Harry, what do you think?
The thing is, I was expecting the Netherlands to drop points. I think they haven't been that impressive in recent years. Obviously, they haven't qualified for the last 2 tournaments. And in qualifying, they weren't brilliant either, but they just have got through the games. They've won the games that they're expected to win. They've maximised. They got the 9 points. Wijnaldum's looks brilliant. And people sort of forget, or at least underestimate, the fact that they went 2-0 up, made a load of subs against Ukraine, went 2-2, and they battled again and got the 3-2 win. And people sort of underlie that or don't recognise that sort of fighting factor. But if they draw that game, maybe it's a completely different game. But group. The fact they've gone and won that match, don't get me wrong, it's going to be a lot more difficult against a very battling Czech Republic side. I imagine that'll be quite a big test. But I think the Netherlands, as much as they could impress me, have impressed me, if that makes any sense. Like, they should be winning those games. But the fact that they have won those games when there's other teams that have dropped points around the place, I've been impressed. I have been impressed with the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm. And a key man for them as well. You mentioned Wijnaldum there, but I think maybe a surprise to people who haven't watched him before is Denzel Dumfries, the right wing back. Do you think any Premier League clubs might just show an interest in him once the tournament is over? You often see transfers that stem from tournament performances.
This is what tournament football, because I do think he's now being labelled as that attacking right back, goal scoring right back for his 2 goals. Or in Clive Tilsley's cases, one more chance than he actually originally thought with the highlight. But he's not been really known for that. And I think someone's going to buy him with the intention of saying, right, this guy's going to get us on the front foot. And he probably won't deliver. I think there's been a lot of players in the past that have been like that, and I reckon he'll be one of them. Just to bring, we want to bring the negativity to this podcast. It's always me, but I think overall though, he'd probably be a fit for someone like Crystal Palace, someone actually mid-table, or like Everton, because we know how Everton love to spend money after tournaments and get these kind of players in. And yeah,
that's very bold, writing him off already. Des.
He's been a key part of that switch to the 3-5-2 working for the Netherlands. Obviously, they didn't play that system before the tournament, but 3 wins from 3, 8 goals scored. They've had moments of uncertainty in each game, but they've been pretty comfortable overall in most. And like you say, it's for one of the easier groups, but I think they've been really impressive. Wijnaldum, like you say, Memphis Depay, Frankie de Jong. They've all been brilliant, and Dumfries, of course.
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of talk around the formations for the Netherlands as well, because they were saying on commentary the other night that historically 4-3-3 has really worked well for them. But like you say, Sam, the 3 at the back has succeeded so far. The Czechs were pretty disappointing against England, I think that's fair to say. But do you think they maybe just didn't go for it, Harry, because they just wanted to avoid Group F?
I think it's a sort of situation when we lost to Belgium in the World Cup. It's like, yes, we probably do want to win, keep the momentum going, but if we lose, oh well, like it doesn't really matter. They knew they qualified, whichever place it was. So it was just sort of, I think they're going through the motions really, and I think they'll be happy with their group qualification, as any team was getting through the group. And I think they have been relatively impressive during the campaign. They put away Scotland quite comfortably, especially because it was at Hampden, their first game in the Euros in such a long time. And it was quite comfortable. Patrick Schick, 2 brilliant goals. The header was very good. So it just sort of got understated because of how good that 49-yard shot was. And then against Croatia, they did the job. Maybe they shouldn't have got the penalty, but that's just the way it goes. They got the point, and that saw them through.
Yep, certainly did. Predictions then. I've got 1-0 to the Netherlands in this one, Sam.
2-2 draw. Netherlands win on penalties.
Well, they've got penalty king Tim Krul on the bench, so maybe they'll be tempted to bring him on. Devon?
Stuff it. Let's back Brad's prediction last week and say 2-1 Czech Republic.
Oh,
I think
interesting.
I do think they've got, even though the other sides, I think Austria would have been a big test in terms of the defensive capabilities, but I think Czech are they're not nice to play against, and you never know.
Harry, very quickly.
Not for me, 2-0 Netherlands.
2-0 Netherlands. So there are 2 more games to cover on the right side of the draw, starting off with Sweden against Ukraine. And I think Sweden surprised a lot of people by topping Group E. They beat Spain and Poland to that spot. I'm not going to count Slovakia in that kind of batch of big-name teams because they were just dreadful against Spain yesterday. But Sweden, this isn't about Slovakia, it's about Sweden. They've kept clean sheets in 6 of their last 8 matches. That's going back to their qualifiers and friendlies before the tournament. So they're in pretty good shape. How important, Sam, do you think their defensive solidity has been to their success so far? Because without Zlatan, they maybe don't have a talisman going forward, although maybe they have found a new one this tournament.
Yeah, it has been important because, like you say, they've struggled a little bit going forward. That quick Emil Forsberg goal in the Poland game was their first from open play. I mean, he was brilliant in that Poland game. I think he's been the stand-up player alongside the other player you alluded to, Alexander Isak, who's definitely one for the future, a very exciting player. Just needs to improve in terms of end product, but he will get there. Maybe not in time for this tournament, but I think they should be confident going into this game, considering Ukraine have not been brilliant. I think they were probably expecting to be out at this point, but they've scraped through as the fourth best third place team. So I think they should expect to win this one.
Yeah, and Maya Jama was tipping Isak to have a big future ahead of him as well. Do you think Ukraine then, having got through as one of the third place teams, they were the fourth best third place team, so that they have scraped through, really? Are they capable of causing Sweden any problems or not?
Yeah, I think Yarmolenko's had some good spurts, and they've got Zinchenko. Obviously, he's had a brilliant season for Man City. Yaremchuk as well at front's been decent, but I think they were pretty poor against Austria. I think Shevchenko was pretty frustrated, disappointed with how they ended their group campaign, and like they say, they're probably a bit surprised to see themselves through to the round of 16. So I think it's a good tie for them. I think they could beat Sweden. They're probably one of the easier teams to get, but I think Sweden will just have a bit too much for them.
Mm-hmm. What's your prediction then, Sam?
I'm going to go high scoring, actually, just randomly 3-2 Sweden.
Interesting. I reckon it's going to be fairly low scoring, actually. I think Sweden are going to edge it 1-0. Harry, what do you reckon?
I'm going to go Sweden for a 2-0 win, because Ukraine are only there because they beat the team they're expected to beat and just got battered a bit less than the other third place teams that got 3 points. So, yeah, Ukraine to lose 2-0.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Devon?
I don't think we've seen the best of this Ukraine side. I think Malinovsky is just a fantastic player, and I think he's going to shine in this 1-0 victory over Sweden.
There we go then. And I think this game will be one that England fans have a close eye on, because the winner of Sweden against Ukraine will face the winner.
Play Germany.
Oh,
Don't say that.
No, less of that. We'll face the winner of England against Germany, which is, I think it's going to be the penultimate game of the last 16 weekend. I think it's on Tuesday the 29th at 5 p.m. Not that I need to advertise that, because all weekend
England are the only team playing at home this round, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Sam, that's a very good point. But yeah, the build up to this game is going to be massive, so you can expect so much over the weekend. We've already spoken about how the last round of games in Group F was, really frantic and really entertaining. And Sam mentioned how all four teams in the group found themselves in second position. So we were thinking, who are England going to play? We didn't know at the time. It got to full time. We knew it was Germany. Harry,
the Germans.
How did you feel, Harry, when you knew for sure that we were going to be facing Germany?
I felt triumphant, because it was the only thing that I got correct in the entire prediction video. No one thought that Germany were going to finish second. They probably shouldn't have finished second, but they finished second. But obviously, it's always going to have that little bit of nervousness. We've got a history of Germany from 2010 and 1996 as well. There's plenty of times where Germany have got the better of us in combative competition. But you've always got to be hopeful. It's at Wembley, so we've got that little advantage over them. And anything can happen. Yes, I know that we've only scored 2 goals, but that's been against very, very defensive-based sides where we've not been able to get in those little pockets of space. Maybe Germany, because they know that, will go into their shell a bit more. But look at Hungary. They got a 2-2 draw against them. Let's look at how teams have done well against Germany. Let's look at the way France have done it. Let's look at the way Hungary have done it and try and go off of that platform. You look at Gareth Southgate, and before the tournament, he says that he's going to play teams based on the opposition he's against, not the last team that played. So let's do that. Make a team that is optimal for beating Germany, whether that means chucking Sancho and maybe finally keeping Grealish. Don't chuck Mount and Chilwell in there just because they've had like 1 day of training, if that, because they're not coming back till the 28th, or I think they're still isolating on the 28th. So don't chuck them back. Have an optimal squad, because that's what we're going to need to beat Germany. I think there's always a chance, because in knockout football, anything can happen in 90 minutes plus 120 plus pens if required.
Devon, do you feel like you've seen enough from England in the group to suggest that we're capable of beating Germany?
Does it look like he has?
No, it doesn't. You're right, Sam.
I was watching his face as you were saying that question. It was just one emotion.
Yeah, the thing is that you just want to get excited. You want to do, but the thing is that I think tactically we could do this. I think Southgate will revert to a 3 at the back just to counteract Germany's setup. I think that Germany they're probably the most vulnerable of the 3 that we could have got. 4, but out of the big 3 in that group, they're probably the most vulnerable defensively. The goals they like to concede. So against Ukraine is Hungary. Is that yes? I am. No, against Hungary they conceded to a header, which when you've got Maguire, you've got Stones, possibly Mings if we've got a 3 at the back. They're 3 big lads that like to win headers in the area. They are also vulnerable when on the counter. England are very good on the counter. We've got the players in there. It's just whether we've got the temperament, because there's winners in that German squad. There's also winners in the England squad. But as a collective, I don't know. This could go either way. Obviously. But I think the good thing is that we need to be aggressive. Southgate needs to go, look, obviously we're going to be a little bit conservative, but let's be aggressive. Get Rice in there, get him, snapping at the heels, because the Germans are really slow in possession and they like to build it up. And as long as if Germany start with Leon Goretzka, I'll be worried. But if they don't, like they haven't, then I think we might have a chance. We just need to dominate in forward areas.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned there about being aggressive. I think if these England players can't get themselves up for this game, which is going to have, so much build up to it. And I think the fact that the side of the draw that we're on looks so favourable after this game, that if we can get through it, there's quite a nice route to the final, you could maybe say. Sam, but what do you think? Have you seen enough evidence in these games that we could do it?
I mean, despite the indifference about how we've performed, this is the most confident we should be going into a game against Germany in a tournament who we've had little to no success against in the past. Because I just think it was a brilliant performance against Portugal, don't get me wrong, but in that Hungary game, they were so poor. And Joachim Löw's comments after the game were very interesting, actually. He said the Hungarians pushed his side to the point of desperation, and he couldn't really pinpoint why Germany struggled so much. I think those comments in a way should give us more confidence to suggest there's a bit of indifference within that camp. They don't really know what went wrong and they just scraped through in the end. So I think Mason Mount is unlikely to play, isn't he? Considering he'll only be back a day before the game. He's not going to be able to work tactics with him and things, and he'll be a big miss. Because although Grealish is great, I'm not sure about how his capabilities in terms of pressing from the front. I think that's where he lacks a little bit, and I'd really like Mason Mount doing that job in that team. So be interested to see how we line up for sure.
Well, you lead me on to that really well there, Sam, because if England do revert to a back 5, which I think is kind of expected, I think Gary Neville's been very vocal and his thoughts on that doubling up on their wing backs would be a good idea. If they revert to that system, that then takes away an attacking player. But you'd have to say that on, when was it, Tuesday night against the Czechs, that Saka really impressed. Sterling got the goal and Grealish in behind showed glimpses of just how good he is in that sort of position. So Harry, who does he pull if he has to put one more at the back? Who does he take out of that team?
There's so many to choose from. That's the problem. And there's people are always going to be saying, don't take out Grealish, don't take out Grealish. And I probably agree with that. There's so many options, because you can't take out Sterling because he's got 20 goal contributions in his 19 for England. Yes, I don't think his performances have been brilliant, but if you're getting match-winning goals, I don't care how you perform. If you have an awful performance against Germany, but get a match winner,
he's the only player that scored.
Exactly.
Mental,
you can't take out Kane because he's the main man, and there's too many options, George. There's too many options, and whatever he does, he's going to get moaned at. Whatever he does, so it's going to be really difficult.
I think that I just can see us starting. I know it's a bit negative, and this is what I've criticised it, so I'm going to come across as a massive hypocrite. But I think if we started Rice and maybe Henderson as that midfield central 2, and in terms of wing backs, I reckon Reece James would on is it Guzans? I can't remember. I don't know how you pronounce
Gosens,
it.
Yeah.
If he, because he's defensively better, I reckon if he doubled on him, and then Kimmich is going to play deeper and provide balls from deep. So I'd actually go with Saka at left wing back to press him further up, win the ball, and then drive forward ahead of Sterling tucking in because Kane's dropped. And I don't know. I think it's a little bit of spice there on the left, just to,
especially because Chilwell won't be fully asset.
Yeah,
I think I'd go Saka.
But I do think Luke Shaw's been really good in these last 2 games.
Yeah.
I don't think this is the time and place for experimenting. It's just my thing, and putting Saka at left wing back where he's not really played much. Yeah, he's very versatile, but I'd like to see Saka come on actually, because I think our biggest problem has been later on in the game. We sort of died out in all of them. Like we tend to start really well, but we just falter towards the end and lose our attacking drive, lose those ideas going forward. So I think Saka will be good coming off the bench late on with those driving runs that we saw in the first half against the Czechs.
I think I'd rather have Saka coming on than I think he's had. Has he played in all 3 games? Marcus Rashford, and done nothing. I think I'd really like
minutes, but
but likewise, he's probably still just not. He's not there. He don't like you'd expect him to bring something fresh, and against the Czech, he put a lot of misplaced passes in there. Rarely got on the ball, and he was having to come deep anyway. Obviously, we were very negative there, but I've just not seen enough from him, and I would like to see. Sancho's coming up against these kind of defenders week in, week out, and got those 37 goal involvements in however many games. And I think someone like Sancho knows the way of how the German defence move. And I don't think it's particularly strong either, this defensive back line. I remember the one in 2014 was really good. They played 2 centre-halves as a back. They played all 4 centre-halves as a back 4, and it worked well. Whereas this one, is it Christian Gunter is just not as capable as they've had in the past.
As much as I agree with the well documented opinion of many fans that Sancho should have had more minutes, I think the chances of him being thrown in for this game are pretty slim, because it just seems like Southgate has so many players in front of him in that order of attacking options, doesn't it? But perhaps he will switch it up due to that familiarity with the German players, as you say, Dev, but I'm just not sure.
I mean, like I've said all that, and I do think Foden will start. I think it's how we set up with a back 3. Are we going to have the players? Is Kane going to be that sort? Because I think with the back 3, I think Kane has to drift in between all 3 centre-halves instead of dropping more, just to allow space for Sterling to drop into and Foden to come in off the left, off the right. It's going to be, if Gareth pulls it off, it's going to be a really good tactical masterstroke. Just because I just don't think we've got enough in there. I think we lack something, and it's hard to pinpoint what. I just think we don't have enough oomph about ourselves. If we go a goal up, we'll sit back, and I can just see it unfolding like we did against Croatia in 2018.
Harry, anything to add? I saw you were kind of hovering over something there.
No, I was just in deep thought, to be honest, because I agree with everything that Devin said about Sancho, but I also think you're very right about Sancho and the fact that he just won't get the minutes because for some reason, maybe it's because he doesn't perform at such a level for England that maybe statistically based, he prefers Sterling or he prefers the other players. But yeah, it's gonna be a tough game, but I think we're just gonna sneak through it. I'm gonna be optimistic and I'm gonna have hope, and I'm gonna say we're gonna sneak through it.
I should say, before we go on to those score predictions, and I'm really interested to see exactly what you guys go for. A lot's been said about the home advantage and how now we've won the group, that 6 out of our 7 games, should we get to the final, would be at Wembley. But that Scotland game at Wembley, of course, it maybe didn't have the effect that England would have wanted. I think it was pretty nervy once the England fans saw that Scotland had that foothold in the game. It's going to be 45,000 now because they're upping it this time. Do you think that is going to make a difference, Sam? And if so, how much of a difference?
it will make a difference, but it could go one way or the other. It could be a positive difference or a negative one, because like you say, in the Scotland game, it did get pretty toxic towards the end, and it can get quite toxic amongst England fans when things start not going our way. So especially against the Germans, so it will be a big occasion. There'll be an atmosphere for sure, and it'll be a good game.
We have to make it hostile. We have to get behind them. We have to make, because I don't think there's many big characters in this German side. So if we get on their back, I think that could have a mental effect. But like Sam said, as soon as, I don't know, someone misplaces a touch, it's all, oh, bloody England, and everyone turns on him. It's just toxic. So it could go either way, like Sam said.
Yep. I think it's probably time for some predictions then. Does anyone want to volunteer to put their neck in the line first?
I think I'll go on. I reckon we'll go 1-0 up and lose 2-1. Sorry, I don't want it to happen. But when we eventually win, I'll just say, yeah, I jinxed it. You're welcome, Gareth.
Fair enough.
I think you'll believe come Monday next week. I think after a weekend of listening to Three Lions, and
that's the same with everyone, isn't it? You all get.
On Tuesday morning, I will wake up in that bed and go, my word, we're gonna win the Euros after today.
Go on, Sam.
I'm gonna flip that score. I'm gonna say Harry Kane's gonna break his duck, and we're gonna win 2-1.
I like the sound of that, Harry.
It's going to be an awful match of football. It's going to end goalless, but England are going to win on penalties. That's what I know. Yeah, it's going to be drama. Exactly. We're going to flip it on their heads. We're going to win on pens, and we're going to face Sweden. There we go. Have some of that.
Can I also request? Is this on BBC or ITV?
It's BBC, isn't it?
All right, 2-1 win for England. Come on.
Oh, because of the record on ITV.
Well, whenever we're on ITV, we start a goal down anyway.
Very good. I have to say, I think it's going to be another 1-0, and I think England are going to edge it. I really do. I know I've been maybe too optimistic since the start of the tournament, but
do you think, George?
I no such thing. Come on.
I just think they would have been my preference out of the three. I think, Dev, you said the same. So I think it's a really good opportunity. I think
such a good opportunity.
When you look at the teams that we could face for the rest of the tournament as well, it's you can't help but just think about maybe winning the tournament. But let's not.
It's just how spineless we are.
Let's beat Germany first. What a game it's going to be. But let's enjoy the first few last 16 games. For anything anyone else wants to add on the England game before we tie things up here? I think we've said
get it right, Gareth. Come on, get it right. I know it's easier said than done, but let's go out and show some intent, attacking intent. Let's not be fearful of this German side. They're not the same German team of the past. Let's go and be the dominant team.
Yeah, and I think
let's also get that waistcoat on, Gareth. Come on, get that waistcoat on.
Get the waistcoat.
I think Southgate is going to know full well just how big a game it is for England, but also for his future as well. Because I think if he wins this game, he's going to win a lot of people round who have doubted him before. Whereas I don't want to think about what's going to happen if we don't win the game. But never mind. We're going to tie it up there then. We've been through the last 16. We've made our predictions. We will hopefully be back next week's episode, and England will still be in the tournament.
Crying about all our wrong predictions.
I don't care how many I get wrong as long as I get the England one right. But there we have it. Please, as we said earlier on, if you want to let us know your predictions, then do so. Follow us on Twitter and TikTok at @_Fourmation for all of that good stuff. And we will see you next time. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.